Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Three Principles Global Community. The Three Principles Global Community, or 3PGC, is a nonprofit organization that's committed to bringing an understanding of the three principles to people throughout the world. Today, we have Ellen Friedman with us. Ellen supports people on a personal journey of health and well-being. She loves guiding people home to transform their relationships with themselves, their health, and others. While providing physical therapy services for over 30 years, her patients began asking for more Ellen-isms. I love that. Following an inner calling, she began coaching in 2011. Then in 2013, she heard something new, simple and profound while watching a video of a Three Principles Practitioner. Since then, Ellen's been blessed to have many different Three Principle teachers. Ellen has witnessed her own life radically shift into deeper peace, especially after struggling with anxiety for decades. In addition, her physical health has significantly improved from symptoms related to 3 different autoimmune conditions. Watching her clients wake up and discover their own peace, well-being, and freedom is a gift she cherishes. In addition to offering one-on-one and small group coaching in person and virtually, Ellen regularly facilitates webinars, seminars, and workshops in which she shares the understanding of the 3 principles impacting physical health. She is offering some new small group virtual intensives called Grace and Ease with Pain and Disease. And I will put, Ellen's website is www.healinghousecalls.com. And I'll also add that underneath the YouTube recording. So if anyone wants to contact Ellen, you'll have that information there. So today, Ellen's topic is physical health and universal mind. Ellen, thanks so much for joining us. I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Bonnie. And I just want to take a moment and thank, 3PGC for providing this space and for all of us to learn. I'm kind of a regular here, and for sure I listen to everyone that I can't physically show up for. And I just find the 3PGC board so generous with all their offerings for practitioners and non-practitioners. And I also, in this week of gratitude, Thanksgiving in the United States, I want to also thank like every single person that I ever had a conversation with. It's been so humbling, and my own learning in every conversation has just been so beautiful, and I really cherish all the conversations that I've had with some of you on this call, and those of you who may listen in the future, and those of you who may never listen. So yeah, I was kind of like minding my own business as a physical therapist, and really loved my work as a physical therapist. I never really thought I would do anything different. And in fact, I thought you had to hate what you did in order to change doing what you did. So my patients were asking for more Ellen-isms, and initially I thought, oh, that's really cute. They, I don't know what I did know what they wanted. They were really looking for more of like the mind, body, soul connection of what I was doing. And I kind of had an agreement with the universe in 2010. If doors opened, I'd walk through them, and found myself coaching more and doing less physical therapy. In fact, it was my patients were like, I don't want the exercise and the mobility training. I want whatever else those Ellen-isms that you're sharing with me. So that was kind of my journey into coaching. And then hearing my first Three Principles Practitioner that I heard was George Pransky, an old video that he had. It was old at that time too, on stress. And I even to this day, I can just remember the feeling that I had. It was just so much lighter and easier and graceful, the way he was describing our experience of stress. Like some part of me knew that, although I wasn't really, some part of me, like it was familiar, but I really didn't know what he was talking about, because at that time I was still very convinced that my stress was outside in. So, so I began, exploring the principles, and I had so many teachers. In addition to my clients, I had so many teachers and programs that I participated in, and they were all amazing. And at the same time, I was going through my own health challenges, and I really thought that health was an exception because my symptoms were real. Like, I could feel them. How could this understanding be saying something different? And so I just had a real big blind spot around that. And then slowly I began to see how the principles were impacting my physical health. So before this understanding, I was pretty convinced that the inner work to heal physical issues was to explore the source of them, the mental, emotional, or spiritual, like, root cause of them. And that if I went into my past and did some processes and whatever else people were guiding me to do, other people were guiding me to do, that would be the answer or the guidance to having a health outcome. And so I did a lot of that work and had some interesting experiences along the way. In fact, I actually had a spontaneous healing of a herniated disc in my low back in 2008 while doing a process. But at that moment, like, I knew that it wasn't the process. I just had a knowing that it wasn't the process. I knew that what I call now mind, or universal mind, or divine mind, was the source of my healing. I just knew that. I knew that from the teacher, the spiritual teacher that I had at the time, but I just also knew that deeply inside of me. And so I began sharing that process and teaching other people how to facilitate that process because it had a profound impact on me. But at the same time, I knew it wasn't the answer for outcome of healing, for someone's outcome of healing. And so the connection between physical health and mind is that mind is the source of physical healing. Just like I see mind is the source of all the thousands of bodily functions that occur throughout my being in every moment, in every hour, in every day. Yes, I can impact my breathing or blinking or swallowing. Like, yes, I can do those things, but they happen automatically. If I cut my finger heals automatically, given the right circumstances. And sometimes not even in the right circumstances. Sometimes people have dirty, infected wounds that still heal. They just maybe heal slower. And in this Three Principles community, I've heard some people share that, like, if you have a deep enough understanding, then you have a shift in your symptoms or a physical healing. And I just have a hard time with that because, like, Sid wouldn't have died of cancer if it was up to having a deep enough understanding of these principles, right? I mean, Sid wouldn't have died of cancer. And while he was going through his experience, as I've been able to have some conversations with some people that were there, he also had his human experience with his symptoms. So what I like to focus on is the experience of our health, the experience of our symptoms, that's something that this understanding supports. And I think sometimes it can feel like, well, if I have this understanding that I shouldn't have symptoms, but I don't see it that way. I just see that this understanding supports my experience of the symptoms. So I kind of just want to take a pause here and see if there's any questions or comments. I'm like much more happy to be engaged in a conversation or interaction. And if not, those that you know me, I'm always good at continuing talking, but I'd much rather.
And if anybody does have any questions, please feel free to unmute yourself or to raise your hand, and I can unmute you. And you do that there's a microphone in the lower left-hand corner of your screen to unmute. And to raise your hand, open the participant window, and there is a raise hand button on the bottom of that.
Thanks, Bonnie. Go ahead. We can hear you now.
Oh, okay. Hi, Ellen.
Hi.
Hi. Can you say more about mind? What is mind as you're using it?
So I'm using Divine Mind as Sid Banks, in the teaching of Sydney Banks, as the source of creation. So some people refer to the universe, some people refer to God, some people refer to spirit, some people refer to energy. Like, to me, all those words are equal. But just because we're in this Three Principles community here, I'm using mind.
Okay. Okay, thanks. That's what I thought. I just want to be sure.
Is there a second question or comment about that?
Not yet.
Okay. Okay. So many different directions I can go. So I'm going to share some of my own experiences and experiences of clients that I've had. So I remember when I was learning this understanding, I was really like, where do I go to find that quiet mind? I was working so hard to find the quiet mind because that's where the answers were. Like, that's what I interpreted. Like, that's where the insights are. That's where my wisdom is. And of course, in my searching, I was looking up there rather than in here. But even when I was looking inside, I was still in this search, like attached to finding something. And then one day, in the middle of a pretty excruciating, painful headache, maybe like an 8 out of 10 headache, I'm just like literally pulling my hair out, like layering thought. How much longer? What is this? Where does this come from? How do I get rid of it? How come I keep on having these symptoms? What does this mean? What does it mean about me? And then all of a sudden, in the middle of all that noise, I heard, I'm just afraid. Like I heard this beautiful voice inside just say, I'm just afraid. And then I said, oh. And Sid Banks' quote, if people could learn to never be afraid of their own experience, that one thing would change the world. That quote just came right in. I was like, oh yeah, I'm just afraid. And in that instance, my body just naturally took a huge exhalation, and my headache went to a 3. Went from an 8 to a 3, like in one breath. Now I knew it wasn't the breath. And I also knew that I didn't have a technique. Oh, I just have to say Sid's quote, or I just have to say Sid's quote and take a breath. I knew was that the wisdom was always there. Busy mind, noisy mind or not. And then I heard it. And then I heard it. And after that, it was really comforting for me to know that the quiet mind, well, first of all, that the insight or fresh thinking wasn't on me to figure out, and that it could come even in a busy mind. Like, that was freeing, because I don't know about the rest of you, but I think we all pretty much have busy minds a lot of the time. And to know that the wisdom was there even in the midst of the busy mind was really freeing for me. So just going to pause and see if anyone has anything to share or add or post in the chat box. Go ahead.
So the quiet mind, is that something that we can tune into, or is it like it's a gift? Does that make sense? Like, do we have any control's probably the wrong word, but do we have, or can we learn an ability to go into that quiet mind?
I think there's a lot of people that think that they can do something to do that. But this morning, when I was thinking about this presentation, I was like, my mind was pretty busy, and I went for a hike, and on the hike, my mind was pretty busy. I was like, wow, I was like here. It was pretty funny. It was pretty funny to witness. Like, I couldn't stop. I couldn't stop the busy mind. But then all of a sudden it was like, oh, I'm in my thoughts. I'm not on the trail. And then all of a sudden I noticed the trail, and I noticed the cactus, and I noticed the rocks, and I noticed the sky and the mountains around me. And I was reminded of Bill Pettit shares a beautiful teaching that his former wife Sue said, that we're either in our mind, we're either in our thoughts, or we're in our life. We're either in our thoughts or we're in our life. And so I have like different versions of that. Like, I'm either in my thoughts or I'm in the room. I'm either in my thoughts or I'm on the hiking trail. I'm either in my symptoms or I'm in my life. And when I'm in my life, the symptoms seem to shift more to the background of life, of my experience. When I'm in my symptoms, they're in the foreground. I'm surrounded everywhere I look. I see symptoms. And then when I'm in my life, they go to the background. I had another experience like that walking, and I was just like, oh, I'm so tired today. Oh, I'm exhausted, and just like layering all this thought about my physical feeling of fatigue. And then all of a sudden, it was gone. And I said, did the fatigue go, or did I leave the fatigue? Like, do our symptoms come and go, or do we come and go from the awareness of our symptoms? And although symptoms can come and go, because of this understanding, I feel like I also, when I know that I come and go from the symptoms, it kind of lightens the intensity of the symptoms. Like, that's just how it works. Just like thoughts come and go, right? My thoughts about my symptoms come and go. And then my experience of my symptoms come and go, until I push repeat, repeat, repeat. And then I'm on that hamster wheel of symptoms. And I used to think that if I was on the hamster wheel of symptoms, that I would find the answer faster or easier to how to get off the hamster wheel of symptoms or how to feel better. But I just don't see it that way anymore. I just see, you know, in an instant that information is available to you in the middle of symptoms or in the middle of a shower or in the middle of a hike.
Is it sort of the same as present moment awareness?
Yeah. Yeah, it sounds the same to me.
Okay. So when we catch ourselves on the gerbil wheel, we can step off.
Sometimes.
Right.
I tried stepping off this morning while
Yeah.
I was
Okay.
I tried stepping off of it this morning while I was hiking, but I didn't. But because I knew that I was the creator of my experience, it was a little bit lighter than when I didn't know that I was the creator of my experience.
Okay. This is good.
Yeah.
Joanne, do you have a question or comment?
I do. Hi, Ellen.
So wonderful to see you.
Let me see. My question is, it seems to me that what I'm hearing or associating is that wisdom is always soft and gentle and I'll just call it positive. In the examples, and the one example that you explained with the symptom being in the background versus the foreground. And that to me seems to be placing adjectives around the three principles definition of wisdom, is that it's always going to feel better or look better. And my experience is that sometimes wisdom blindsides me and it doesn't really feel that great. So I guess
yeah, especially doesn't feel great if I don't like the answer.
Yeah, something like that. It's sort of like, I guess I'll be a little bit more specific. I just released a corporate America project because it was a negative environment. It was like a lot of bullying and then seeing the woman, you know, on TV and the powerfulness of that, I sort of kept thinking, I think I'm going to have my Me Too moment. Am I finally? I mean, if that's my last hurrah. But it wasn't that comfortable to have a Me Too moment. I believe that it will reconcile as wisdom. It feels that way. It feels like it has a gentle lane to it, but it wasn't really that comfortable. That wisdom. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, if I'm hearing you accurately, I'm hearing you say like you have this idea that wisdom should come in a certain tone and with a certain feeling. Is that what you're saying?
Or that the examples in my experience over the years of listening to Three Principles things and books and all that other stuff, the examples always seem to have a happy path. And the path even seems to be happy when you're in it. Well, wait a minute, like before you're in it, it doesn't feel happy. And then somehow the three principles light shines and then the happy path starts and then it ends in a happy way. And I'm just like, wait a minute, it just, I know there's something maybe in my thought to reconcile about that, because wisdom, I don't know, it's just, it's the onboarding of wisdom and the outcome can't always be a happy.
Well, I mean, it is what it is. And then if we like it, we put the happy ending on it. If we don't like it, we put the unhappy ending on it.
Well, then that seems to be a topic of acceptance to me, of radical acceptance.
Yes, but if I understand yes, it's a topic of acceptance, but for me, acceptance is the outcome of the understanding. So I'll share an example. I don't know if related to health, that it might, and let me know if it feels relevant to what you're sharing. So I had been contemplating doing a alternative treatment for my health. I started it several years ago, and I got really sick, and so I just knew I had to get like my body in kind of better shape. So I work on my body, getting healthier and doing different things, and then, you know, am I ready? Should I do it? If I do it, which practitioner? And then one morning, I literally like wake up in the morning, I'm like, okay, I'm ready, and this is the practitioner I'm going to work with. And I go, you know, I make an appointment, and I go in, and I start that treatment, and then I start having symptoms during the treatment. I'm like, well, is this my body detoxing, or is this my body healing, or is this my body saying, no, go in another direction, you're still not ready for this? I mean, all that went in, but I knew that I knew that my experience of it was created by which thought I was attaching to. And I stayed with it, and then sometime, I don't even know how many weeks I was in it, I woke up one morning, I'm like, okay, we're done. Now, I don't know if I had the physical health outcome. Like I didn't do a measure, something that might measure it. I don't know if I did have the physical health outcome. But what I knew was that I had a clear guidance to go in one direction, and I followed that. And then I had a clear guidance to stop, and I followed that. Is that helpful, Joanne? Is that along the line of what you were asking?
I will try not to think about that. I know. I guess. Well, just sit. I'll sit with that. I mean, I don't think there's a wisdom guarantee to know that it's real wisdom or not wisdom, or when the wisdom shifts. It just, you know, I've just never heard like anything about, man, I got bad wisdom. like where does the bad wisdom come in?
Well, bad wisdom would come from the personal mind running wisdom through its insecure thinking. So sometimes I get like clear guidance, and then my insecure thinking goes, well, and starts questioning, maybe really you're going to go see that person, why you're going to spend that money, you're going to do that. So there's wisdom, and then there's personal insecure thinking, and if we run it through that, we will get the experience of confusion around the wisdom.
Well, doesn't that imply that wisdom does, well, I guess the question is, do you believe wisdom does or does not come from thought? Because you have a thought that this is a wise thing, and it may not be.
Well, if wisdom and thought and mind and consciousness are all the same thing, then they all come from the same place. And then we have the personal mind and the personal consciousness and the personal thought. So when people are seeking like an outcome, are we okay to move on, Joanne? I'm sorry.
Yes, absolutely.
Sometimes too much thinking about it. And if you want to continue having the conversation with me, you know how to get a hold of me, and anyone. I'd be happy to explore more. Great. So when I think about physical health and this understanding, these teachings, like it occurred to me, it's no different than like mental health. Like we have physical well-being and we have mental well-being. They're the same. In one respect, they're the same. And I can't imagine any Three Principles practitioner or psychiatrist or psychologist or coach that would say to a client, well, now that you have this understanding, you won't experience depression anymore, or you won't experience anxiety. And I feel the same way about physical health. With this understanding, tells us where our experience is created. And not the outcome. It doesn't point us to the outcome. Well, it can point us in a direction to seek a certain health practitioner, a certain path for physical healing. But if we took any one diagnosis label and there was a path that worked for even a huge percentage of people that are struggling and not find that, I'm not talking, certainly there are certain things that certain conditions that if you do A, B, and C, there's a strong likelihood of healing. And for people that nothing seems to be working and they're seeking, like there are so many integrative and alternative techniques, you could spend a lifetime seeking them. You could spend a lifetime seeking them because I don't see that there's one path for everyone. And I think that when we're in a physical health situation, sometimes we have moments where our state of mind is lower, and so it can feel more confusing of which direction to go, or what procedure to have, or what not to have, or what practitioner to see. It can definitely feel more confusing, but the guidance, the wisdom is still there gently. Like I see symptoms as like a gentle tap on the shoulder, waking us up. And for me, healing goes way beyond physical healing. That there's healing available mentally and emotionally and spiritually. And I recently heard like spiritual healing is, that depth of inner peace. And I just love that. Like that's available. Spiritual healing, inner peace is available to everyone, regardless of the diagnosis, regardless of the severity of symptoms. And it reminds me of a client that I worked with a few years ago who had a diagnosis of a stage 4 cancer diagnosis, and she was using integrative treatments to support her healing journey. And she was actually in Arizona getting treatments, and she went back to the East Coast to like sell off all of her possessions to pay for things that insurance wasn't paying for. And in the midst of that, she said, this is the busiest and most intense time of my life, and I'm having fun. And we know that fun is good for the immune system. And because of her understanding, she was able to have fun while she was selling off all of her personal belongings. Like that, I just found that so extraordinary that someone could have that experience. Now, was she having fun 24/7? No, but none of us are. We're all experiencing life in the moment, right? And then about 6 weeks later, she called me and she said, Ellen, I just got my lab results and my cancer markers are higher than when I started treatment. And I went into shock. I went into shock. Well, I mean, I don't know anyone that wouldn't go into shock. But then she said, because of my understanding and because of our work together, the shock passed and joy was present. Wow. I mean, I'm just still moved when I think about her and her story and her experience. Because of her understanding, joy was still available to her. Which brings me to another thing that I understand about life and health and these principles is that the intensity of symptoms or the severity of disease is not a like one-to-one correlation with our experience of our health. So we can have high pain. Like I used to think like high pain went with high suffering, or, you know, stage 4 diagnosis went with high suffering. But I have so many examples. When I stop and think about it, I have so many examples that that's just not true. Like we probably all can see that in our own lives, right? It's the thought that's added on to the symptoms or the experience that creates that symptoms or labels that creates the experience, not the illness or the experience itself. When I was in my early 20s, one of my very first physical therapy patients was a quadriplegic. And I don't remember exactly what level his spine was involved, but it was high enough that he had, you know, no active movement in his hands, or he was just completely paralyzed from the neck down. And in my young, innocent, ignorant way, in one of our conversations while I was doing exercises with him, I said, how is it that you have this like pleasant, uplifted experience with having this physical status of complete paralysis? And he said, oh, I learned a long time ago that things could always be better and always be worse. And then, you know, out of my mouth comes, things could be worse, kind of. And he said, yeah, I could have had a brain injury with my spinal cord injury. And I just was like, wow. And his voice and his message carried me through so many patients that when I worked as a physical therapist. Not that things could be better or be worse, but that his experience of life was not dependent on being a complete quadriplegic. Wow. And I think that I had like a natural tendency to see like the innate health in people. I never got burnt out working as a physical therapist. And I thought it was always because I was picky about where I worked and stuff, but it was, and because I was always lucky enough to be able to have the job that I wanted almost all the time. But I think that I never got burnt out because I never saw a label. I never saw a diagnosis. I always saw the innate health in someone. And even with someone with stage 4 cancer, they still have trillions of healthy cells in their body. So again, I'm just going to pause for a moment and see if there's any conversation that anyone wants to have, or questions. And I appreciate the ones that have already come in. Don't hesitate. Sure, go ahead. You're still muted, Emma.
Okay. Can you hear me now? Okay. You made me think of 2 experiences I've had along those lines. One was with a woman. She was a patient of mine who had end-stage breast cancer. And she was bedridden, but she still lived her life. And what she would always say, it's not pain, it's pressure. And that's the way she handled it. But the other example that you brought to mind, and of course it's an animal, is there used to be a sanctuary in California for all sorts of animals, and this was an 800-pound pig who was quite old, and of course when they're raised for meat, they get too big to walk. And he was a paraplegic for a very long time, and he was happy as a clam. They had to move him everywhere. He ended up being a Reiki teacher. And I was just thinking how universal that is, that what I think you called it, that innate health, that drive to live the life that's given us regardless of the circumstances we find ourselves in.
Yeah. And as you're sharing that, like the story of the patient with breast cancer, like she found that inside of her. No one said, "Oh, you should do this."
Oh,
or,
yeah.
You know, she right?
Yes,
Even
absolutely.
as her doctor, as her practitioner, you couldn't have told her something that she should do something.
No.
She found that.
Yes.
Wisdom guided her. Mind guided her.
And she taught me at that point. You know, I wasn't the one who.
Right.
But,
yeah, that's beautiful. I wanted to take a minute and share some fresh thinking I have around consciousness and physical health. I'm seeing that our response to symptoms, our response to labels and diagnoses is like a barometer of our consciousness in the moment. So what I mean by that is if I have a recurring experience of some symptom, let's just use fatigue for an example, because a lot of people have experiences with fatigue. So if in a lower state of consciousness in the moment, I'll think, oh, there's something wrong with me. Oh, my autoimmune is acting up. Oh, I've got to do something with it. I mean, I could have a lot of thinking about it, but it would be that tone. It would be like a worry, a fear. And then in a higher state of consciousness, it might be like, wow, my body's communicating with me. Thank you for the message. I just need a brief rest right now. And I love that, because I think that when I first began learning this understanding, I thought that if I had this understanding, and if I had a higher state of consciousness, then I would have a certain response to my own symptoms or someone else's symptoms. But I also see that going up and down moment to moment and fluctuating moment to moment. And there's some freedom in there for me to see symptoms as, or my response to symptoms as a barometer or indicator of my current consciousness about it, and knowing it doesn't mean anything about me. It just means where I am in the moment. Make sense? Questions? Conversation? I see some unmuted. Go ahead and speak if you. Emmy, you're still muted, but I think there were some other people. Let's just see if there's someone else that.
Sherry, are you there?
I'm here. Hi, Ellen. I was just curious from, from where you sit, and for all of the people, us, of whatever stage of our life, or the people we care about, like from where all your experience in being a healthcare provider, just what would you really want people to understand that's important to you? That's important to you, like when they get these diagnoses or when they're dealing with what they're dealing with. You sound so heart-centered, so I just would love to know what you would really like people to know is there.
Yeah, you know what? I asked myself that right before I came on today.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So thank you for being attuned. Yeah, that mind is the source, the ultimate source of physical healing. That's one thing that's really important to me, and that there's an okayness inside of us, like no matter what the diagnosis is, no matter what the label is, no matter what the severity of the symptoms, and there's an okayness there. And we go in and out of recognizing that and feeling that, and that's just the way life is, because of that's the understanding of the principles for me, is that we go in and out of remembering that we're okay, even with a heavy diagnosis, or even in the face of a loved one having a heavy diagnosis. And with a loved one, so as you know, and some of you other, like I've had about 250 people that I've worked with on a journey of healing cancer, and I've worked with a lot of their family members. And it's so important for people to have the dignity of their own process and the choices that they make about treatment, whether they do or don't go down any path. I think that especially people facing cancer or other life-limiting illnesses, it's so important to me, because people feel a lot of pressure. They feel pressure from their doctors. They feel pressure from their family to do something that they don't want to do. And I want people to know that this understanding helps us helps our experience of any health situation with ourselves or others. It's not the physical, it's the mental, emotional, and spiritual cure, but not always the physical cure. And when I say cure, I'm saying that lightly. Like for me, the mental and spiritual and emotional cure is knowing that I move in and out of fear and faith with my experience. Like that's what cure doesn't mean, that I don't or the outcome of mental and physical, mental and emotional, spiritual healing is not that I don't get down in the dumps, or not that I don't get sad, or now that I don't get fearful. It's just knowing that I'm the creator of that experience through these beautiful principles of mind, consciousness, and thought. Anything else, Sherry?
Well, I was just thinking that I that the part that you said about um, the feeling under pressure for um, from the physicians or from the ones close to them and all that too. And I think that that's so helpful to see that as being a support to a patient. It was really important for me to see that um, it was nothing more than my thinking that could cause a disconnection from the patient, you know, in the place of what I think that person should be doing or what I think would be best. And that was so helpful to see that as being um, uh, not the truth about the situation, but really the truth about my thinking in that moment. And and seeing that was I think very helpful to the it was very helpful to the patient, because it was very helpful to me to not be exerting my thinking on the patient. So because I really just see how much that in those intense situations we really feel like our thought is more than thought, and want to
And that
drive
we
the
know
process
best,
of healing.
and we know best for someone else.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, that's beautiful. Thanks so much for asking that question and sharing your experience. And I mean, I've had clients who no one, like, they thought they were on a 3-month spa visit to Arizona because no one knew that they had an advanced cancer diagnosis, because they were so afraid of what people would think of, you know, and of their choices. But I also think that people, like, when we remember, people are responding from their state of mind in the moment. So you may have thought, like, we may think that we know something, or that we have an answer because we're in fear about the other person and about the diagnosis. And I love Kelly Turner's an author who wrote a book called Radical Remission. It's an amazing book. And it's for, you know, she studied thousands of people or hundreds, I think, of people who had spontaneous remission of cancer diagnosis, and the common themes, the 9 common themes in them. But I love her definition of fear, not definition, but her acronym for fear. Fear is forgetting every available resource. And so just take a moment, like, forgetting every available resource. What does that mean to you? For me, it means forgetting the source of healing, forgetting mind. That's what fear means. Oh, I have had a momentary forgetfulness of the source of healing. And then I was like, well, what's faith? I was like, what's faith? And I worked really hard to think about what faith meant to me, or what an acronym for faith. And then it was so beautiful. I heard faith is feeling awe in the heart. Feeling awe in the heart. That's faith. And we don't have to do anything to have fear or faith. It's just, am I down this thought lane, or am I down this thought lane? That's how I see it.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments? Oh, somebody, Mary?
Yeah, well, what time did this start?
At the top of the hour, just before.
So how far into this are you today?
56 minutes.
Okay, so does it end at 2:00?
Eastern, yes. I don't know. No, not 2:00 Eastern. No, it ends in 3 minutes.
Oh, so I am late. I'm so bummed. Okay, I'm here in the Central Time Zone, so it's ending very soon, and I'm bummed about that. I had the time wrong.
Well, luckily for all of us, the Three Principles Global Community records this, and luckily for me, I love to. If you haven't figured out, I'd love to have this conversation. I would really be more than happy to, to have a conversation with you, Mary, and anyone else that's here. And I'm starting a small group intensive, 6 sessions in a concentrated time where people can explore their personal journey of healing and understanding. And that begins a week from today. Is that true? Yes, it begins a week from today. And there's more information on my website under services for that. And I'm doing another one in January as well.
And Ellen, I don't know if you have a few more minutes.
Sure, absolutely. I'm happy
Mary,
to say that.
Yeah, Mary, if you have a question, and then Zoe also has her hand raised. Do you have a question, Mary?
Oh, no, I wouldn't know where to start, and it would only take a couple minutes, but
But that's okay.
Well, for one, what was the theme of today?
The theme was physical health and mind.
Physical health and mind.
Yeah.
No,
If you
so
don't want to listen to the whole thing, you can just listen to the last 15 minutes because Sherry asked a beautiful question about what my message was. And so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So just that for me, it's just important to remember as we're on a journey of seeking really hard to find a physical answer to a physical health situation, that mind is the source of healing, and that we can have emotional, mental, and spiritual healing, but the outcome of who has physical healing, I see, is up to mind, is up to the source of life.
Zoe, did you have a question?
Hi, yes. Well, not a question. I really wanted to thank Ellen for her presence, and that I just was listening so deeply, very touched and inspired with hope. Thank you for pointing me in the direction of just getting grounded in my presence and quieting that mind chatter that can hijack me when pain is flared up. And I look forward to participating in your class. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ellen.
Yeah. And I think it's really important, Zoe, thank you for the reminder, like just because we have this understanding doesn't mean that our minds don't get hijacked by pain. But it means that we can have pain with less suffering. And it can mean like a reminder that all experiences are transitory. All experiences shift. I mean, I in a brief conversation, I saw your experience shift multiple times. with pain. So, that, but when we're in it, it's easy to feel like we're never going to get out of it. I know that. I know that feeling.
Thanks.
Yeah. And I'm happy to stay on if anyone has any other time, or Bonnie, if you want to stop the recording, I'm happy to stay on for Mary.
Well, I just want to, okay, I want to thank you, Ellen, so much for this. It was really a lovely conversation. And just remind everybody that the next webinar is with Sherry Ray, and that's on December 11th. So I hope to see you all live then.
Thank you.